Now, investigators say he did call police again while officers were still there, so they arrested him on a misdemeanor. We want to bring in our chief local analyst, Colleen Froed. Some things we've heard from people like Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden is that when Iryna's law comes into effect Monday, which is going to make some things like an involuntary commitment possible, it's going to create a lot more work for the courts and for his officers and deputies. First, Cliff, what do you think about that added impact? What does that look like in the legal process of those involuntary commitments, the paperwork and everything that comes with it?
As a person that's the former chief magistrate of Mecklenburg County, I can tell you that most of the things that the General Assembly does in North Carolina, there's a disconnect with what actually happens on the ground. So you have grass top and grassroots, or you have folks that are actually doing the work. So someone that was in there, I can say that on the magistrate level in the state of North Carolina, with the discretion and with the supervision of a district court judge, a magistrate already could issue an involuntary commitment before Iryna's law was passed. So when I was there, and I was there in 2015 till 2019, or I should say 18, during that time, say if an individual came in to get an involuntary commitment, I would go through the entire process. And then we'd call a district court judge. And the district court judge would either go over the phone or listening to the facts that we would do, and they would say, yes, go ahead and grant it or deny it. And it also said in our local rules, if you couldn't get a district court judge on the phone, you could go ahead and grant it already on your own discretion. I issued tons of involuntary commitments when I was there. So there will be no significant change to the way a person, if they walked in today or they walked in December 1st, you would still be able to get 24-hour access to an involuntary commitment because the magistrate's office in North Carolina are open continuously. So that's really a misnomer when folks are saying that's a massive change, because it's really not. That was already there.
Part of Iryna's law will be the mandatory mental health evaluations. Some people kind of argue that this law should have been paired with increased funding for that. That didn't necessarily happen. So whose responsibility will it be to carry out mental health evaluations, and then who holds them accountable?
I mean, there's a lot of more questions in this law than answers. That's what I could say, and I think they're going to be trial by fire and learning in terms of how this will work and how it would actually be implemented. And again, that's not a dig at our General Assembly, but it's if you don't have conversations with folks that are doing the job. If you're not talking to those people on a daily basis, then you're just throwing things at the wall in the response. And this is, again, not their fault, because most of our laws are created in response to a tragedy. So I get it, but it's better that you talk to people. Like if I'm going to create a domestic violence shelter, I want to talk to domestic violence victims. If I'm going to create something that is supposed to make the process more efficient for pretrial release, well, the overwhelming majority of people that come through the criminal justice system in North Carolina are released through the magistrate process. So if you don't talk to magistrates, if you're not getting input from the Magistrates Association, it's kind of hard for you to make an impact or a decision on what magistrates do on a daily basis.
And you talked a little bit about involuntary commitments and that it can still be done with the old way, but how difficult is it when you have someone who doesn't want to be committed and you have other parties saying they need to be committed if there's no history of being admitted? How do you choose whether or not to admit that person?
I hit it right on the head. I mean, it's the hardest part of my job that I had as a magistrate, to see a family member bring in their sibling or be there and request that their sibling be involuntary committed, because most of the time they wouldn't have them there. I had family members crying right in front of me saying, I want them to do this, I don't want to do this, but they need this. Yes, the involuntary part is the part where it doesn't matter if the person wants to go or not. Once I sign the order that they need to be involuntary committed, they'll go pick them up and they'll attempt to get them by any means necessary. What I can tell you is the secondary effect of most of these changes, and not the involuntary commitment part, but the release portion. We'd already removed a number of things that magistrates could do in the wake of, I would say, what we did here, changing our bail policy right in Mecklenburg County, affected the entire state. So 2 years ago, there were significant changes to pretrial release. This new law, which will take effect December 1st, has even more changes to what magistrates can touch in setting conditions for release. So any violent crime, any sex offense crime, these are charges now. The magistrate won't release them. So what does that look like? They'll sit there and wait for the next day to see a district court judge. That is going to be a monster undertaking to deal with. And I cannot overestimate how much that's going to impact our system. Before, your magistrate may see 2,000 to 3,000 people a night. Those people are now just going to be sitting there and wait to go to court the next day. So our courts are going to be overflooded on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, trying to deal with folks that would have been out and set for next court day.
Khalif, we're almost out of time, but quickly, I do want you to answer. Based on what we saw from that body cam footage, would you have asked for an involuntary commitment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would have asked for it instantly. I mean, he exhibited a number of signs. He said that he was hearing things, that his body, his mind was telling him to do things. I mean, so you have to have that ideation. You have to have suicidal, harm to yourself or harm to someone else. That's the standard. I don't need to even know anything else. I just need to know that you want to harm yourself, you want to harm someone else, and someone in your head or something in your head is telling you to. I would have signed that 20 times over.
All right, Khalif, thank you. Appreciate that.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.